So, the industry's relationship with video game critics has always been a hotly contested one. Sometimes they're viewed as champions of the people, other times they're the first up against the wall with claims of being paid off in the face of terrible titles. Which is actually genuinely hard to say sometimes, but it creates a very interesting divide indeed. For example, time and time again we've come across instances where public opinions and those of the air quotes pros simply do not align. So let's take a look at some of these impasses today and ask ourselves, which side do we agree with? With this in mind, I'm Jules of WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 times video game critics got it wrong. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to stay notified. Ding, ding, done. Number 8, Mass Effect Andromeda. Ooh, this one actually hurts quite a lot from a personal standpoint, as I absolutely love the Mass Effect trilogy, so much so that it almost filed a restraining order against me. So for Andromeda to saunter up and say that it was the new cool kid in town only to fall over shit itself and rip my shiny Charizard in the process, well, that's not on, pal. The graphical bugs were one thing, but the weirdly janky story and downright terrible voice acting in places hampered the experience throughout. Yet the critics for the most part didn't seem to mind. There were a fair few high scores thrown towards this title, and it received a ton of push on some major publication sites. Yet the fans were quick to point out that this was not the sequel that was wanted. Hell, it wasn't even the one that was needed. In fact, if you were being really honest about it, you could say that it pretty much killed the series dead for the moment. The critics seem to have ignored this though and given the game an average of 7.1 on Metacritic, but the fans on the other hand a scathing 4.8. Number 7, Deadly Premonition. Now, objectively speaking, Deadly Premonition is not a good game. It performs about as well as a coma patient high on cough syrup trying to use a crane to set up a house of cards, and it is about as cheesy as the Cheetos Cheetah's bell end. Yet, speaking from my own personal warped view, this game is utter perfection. It's charming, it's weird, it's so frustrating that I want to tear out my beard, stick it to my head and tear it off again, but I love it, and I'm not the only one. So many people who've tried this ugly game have walked in scoffing and walked out enamored. It's like Twin Peaks and Silent Hill made love with Resident Evil 1's voice acting. Some critics just couldn't get their heads around this title though, and lambasted it from the traditional viewpoints of looking like hot trash, but this is something else, something greater than the sum of its parts, and has garnered an impressive cult following since its release. Who knows, I might actually be working on a piece specifically about it as we speak. Number 6, Star Wars Battlefront 2. Not only did Star Wars Battlefront 2 screw up improving the game in any meaningful way, it also managed to cause a worldwide controversy that might have changed how microtransactions are done forever. Sales were massively down from the last game, and it seemed like the game topped more worst games of 2017 lists than any other that year. So how did one of the most hated games of our generation score with the critics? Well, surprisingly well. Battlefront 2 managed to get reviews that most games would only dream of. And from a technical standpoint, the game does play pretty okay. It's just wrapped in so much annoyance and faff and obviously loot box drama that it's almost impossible to ignore. Plus, the single-player experience, which touted itself as a game changer, was about as grandiose as an Ewok with no legs. Metacritic score of 1. Ouch. Number 5, Alpha Protocol. Obsidian Entertainment has always had the misfortune of being compared to BioWare, which you can kind of see in that they try to focus on storytelling rather than combat, but it was so unfair of critics to tear Alpha Protocol apart for these reasons. True, the game isn't perfect, but shooting the horse before it's had the chance to run the race fairly isn't great criticism, and those that played this title commend the focus on espionage over out-and-out combat. In fact, these mechanics were so well interweaved that it's a real joy to use lies and deception to get to your goals. It's a truly underrated RPG that, while being rough around the edges, is definitely more Bond than bland. Number 4, Verdun. Before Battlefield 1 came out and stole the limelight, Verdun was proving that World War I online shooters could still be successful in a sea of futuristic multiplayer titles that were releasing around the same time. The shooter ditched the frantic instant action of Call of Duty in favour of slow and considered assaults where a couple of rounds from the chamber was enough to stop a player in their tracks. It was intense, it was dirty, and surprisingly, it held a player base even after Battlefield 1 dropped, yet the critics did not look favourably upon this title. They pointed at the game's admittedly low production values and wrote off its multiplayer firefights as being too niche to succeed. Fans, on the other hand, couldn't disagree more, and even a few years after getting their mitts on it, are far from Verdun with the games. #puns, I've got them. Number 3. No Man's Sky. How the hell did this game get so many good reviews? It's almost like the game's critics only played it for a few hours before slapping labels all over it. Oh wait, that's totally what they did, isn't it? Nowadays, this game is actually pretty decent, having received a lot of support and patches, but when it dropped, my god was this disappointing. The gameplay was as basic as a Rich Hudson opinion and about as frustrating to watch expand. Then there was the deceit in which the devs out and out lied more than your mothers do when they tell you I'm not your dad. There's my one per list. Also, side note, you're all making me very proud. Stay in school and don't do drugs unless you think that they'll make you look cooler, etc, etc. In fact, the best way to describe the negativity of this game is to go back and watch somebody actually complete it and get sent all the way back to the start. It was an exercise in pointlessness, which is only now just about starting to redeem itself. Number 2. Star Wars Bounty Hunter. Although it took an absolute kicking from critics all the way back in 2002, Star Wars Bounty Hunter has slowly become one of the most beloved Star Wars games of all time. It's actually up there with the likes of KOTOR and Jedi Knight in the upper echelon of the subgenre, because the Jango Fett-led release nailed a side of the world that's always been criminally overlooked. The seedy underbelly of bounty hunters is something that's always intrigued fans, and this brilliant third-person shooter brought the strange vistas and untrustworthy characters of this environment to life, resulting in an epic Star Wars experience that didn't have a single lightsaber in sight. Plus that jetpack, baby! You can even have a go on it now on current consoles, and it's actually hard to see why this took such a beating. And number 1, Destiny 2. Nobody likes Destiny 2 more than the critics. Upon launch, and even now to some extent, Destiny 2 was considered to be one of the emptiest experiences of this generation, with no massive improvements over the original game, and nothing really placing it above any game out at the time. Unlike the first Destiny, which still managed to have a large and devoted fan base, Destiny 2 was mostly rejected by those same people. Destiny 2 was labelled as boring, unfulfilling, and an absolute grind, and that's not even mentioning how bad the randomised loot had gotten. Yet despite all of this, Destiny 2 still managed to get some pretty great reviews from critics all over the world. 8s and 9s all over, with only a few critics giving it a mediocre score. For a game that's generally regarded as Destiny 1.5, how the critics gave it a better review is a mystery. A big, fat, smells like a full wallet mystery. But hey, that's just a speculation.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to subscribe below, and if you're looking for more content like this, then try a few things that are floating about around my ears. Might be fun. I can't promise it though, but it might be.